Hello and welcome. I have a very special guest with me today, the Right Honourable Liz Truss MP, former Prime Minister of Great Britain, who's been here the first time in the 1990s. We've changed a lot, so has Britain, become much more multicultural. What has your experience been of, I know this is a really short visit, but what has your experience been of coming back to this country?
Well, every time I come here, I see how much India has changed.
Yeah.
And India has huge opportunities ahead. That's what's, I think, so exciting. You know, the world's biggest democracy. India is shortly about to become the world's most populous country. I think it's becoming the most populous.
It's one honour that we don't really want, but
well, I don't agree with that, because I want to see a world in which more people are living in free societies.
Yeah.
More people are living in democracies. So I think it's a good thing that India will be the most populous country in the world. And I just see huge potential in everything from technology to life sciences. I remember visiting the Serum Institute and seeing the development of medication during the COVID crisis. So what I just see is this. India has always been a country with potential, but I just see that potential realising and it really sort of building momentum, which is exciting.
Right. And you've been Foreign Secretary, you've been Lord Chancellor. I know why they call it Lord Chancellor, but
it's a very ancient title.
Yes,
it's been going since the 1600s. I think the job has changed.
Yes. But you've been in rooms where there are not too many women. In fact, there are hardly any women. What is it like to be up against the posh boys?
Well, I think you always feel in those circumstances that it's important that you hold your ground and you speak your point of view. And what I always feel is, regardless of what the outcome is, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, if you go there and you don't make your voice heard, if you don't stand up for what you believe in, I think that's where I would feel bad. So I've always sought to put across my point of view. From the beliefs that I have, from the experiences I've had in my life.
And I've always noticed that when it's a choice between the difficult thing and the more popular thing, you've gone for the difficult. Why is that? It's just a personality quirk, or you really like a challenge?
I love a challenge.
Yeah.
I love a challenge, and I don't believe that the easy things are always the right things. And I think particularly in the world we live in the moment, which is a very complex world, it's changing very fast. I think we need to change, and change is often difficult. It is often easy to say we don't need to do anything, we can just carry on as we have been, but that isn't facing up to the challenges we face. So yes, I personally like a challenge. It's something that I run towards the challenge, but I think it is what our times demand of us, that we need to be bold. We're facing real threats. I talked about, India being the world's largest democracy, but we face a threat of rising authoritarian regimes. The fact is, there are fewer people now who live in democracies than did 30 years ago. And I don't want to live in a world where living in a free society is something that is only available for a very small minority. Right. I think that's a bad thing. So I think we do need to stand up and be counted.
Right. And when you talked about difficult choices, some of the things that you've argued for and advocated, whether it's childcare or whether it's a tougher curriculum in school, these are not necessarily popular things because they disturb the status quo. Yet you've gone for it. What makes you do that? Why is a more perhaps tougher curriculum, a more expanded childcare important for Britain as it is today?
What is important is that Britain is able to succeed in the long term. And in order to succeed, we need to be competitive. The world doesn't owe Britain a living. We need to go out there and make our way. And what I saw, and I visited countries around the world, I saw countries with tougher curricula. I saw kids able to do maths in primary school that children in Britain weren't able to do in high school. And those children are going to be in the workforce in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time. And I want our children in Britain to have the best possible skills. And you know, we all know that you've got to work and you've got to do tough things in order to improve. And that's what I did when we changed the curriculum. We made it more challenging. Now my daughters aren't entirely happy with that. They're the recipients. They've had to do, my elder daughter had to do the tough new GCSE that I put in place. So she's
not a very
bit of complaining there. But you know, I do think that by doing those things early on, it benefits children, and you know, they're able to be more successful and be able to unleash opportunities. And that's ultimately what I'm about, is about people being able to have control and agency over their own lives. And you can't have control and agency of your own life without having a good level of education, a good level of mathematics in particular. You know, it's an area actually where India is very strong. You know, maths and STEM skills, and we need to be looking at countries like India and saying, how are we going to learn from you?
Right. And expanded childcare, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? Because working mums need the support of the state, and you can't have families, happy families, if you have unhappy mothers. Now, talk a little about that idea of childcare. I mean, I know friends who spend as much as they earn on childcare.
Absolutely, and you know, this is important for modern families. You know, we don't live in a world anymore where only one person goes out to work. We need to be able, and it's of course up to families to decide how they want to organise their lives, but it can't be the case that Britain, which has some of the most expensive childcare in Europe, it continues to be in that situation where it's very difficult for parents to afford. So that is why we have taken steps. Of course, there's always more to be done to make childcare more affordable, but it's an important part of modern life.
Right. So talk about, you know, you talked about the importance of standing up and speaking up. It isn't always possible for all women to do that, and you see that, you know, you've shattered the glass ceiling and possibly danced all over it as well. But there are self-imposed ceilings that, you know, women face in leadership positions when it comes to politics or business or whatever field. So what's the advice that you have for them? You know, apart from leaning in, as Sheryl Sandberg tells us, and, you know, making sure we have a seat at the table and all that. But really, you know, when women come to you for advice and say, you know, what is it that we can do so we can become like you? What do you tell them?
Well, what I say is, first of all, you need to put yourself forward. People aren't going to ask you. They're not going to invite you. You have to push yourself forward. That's really important. And you have to stand your ground. You can't allow yourself to be shouted down. Plenty of times when people will try and do that, and you have to stand up. Now, I think we can make things fairer and better. I've always supported making, for example, recruitment more transparent, making it clearer how you get up to the next stage in your career. So I think there's always more we can do to make things fairer. But ultimately, you know, it's about having the ability to say to yourself, I'm just going to go for this, and being prepared to not succeed. I think quite often people can think, well, I'm worried about what happens if things go wrong. Now, I've had a career where some things have gone right and some things haven't gone right. And I am somebody who's prepared to take risks. And I think it's important to consciously do that, because if you're not prepared to take risks, I don't think you learn. I don't think you have the experience you then need to succeed down the line. So that's the advice I would give people. And I think the world is changing. I think we're seeing so many more women in really senior positions, whether it's in business or politics or in thought. I'd love to see more women running think tanks and sort of getting involved in ideas and political ideas as well. So I think we have made a lot of progress, but you can never give up.
We have to create an old girls network, right? Or a young girls network, whatever you want to call it. That has to be done, right?
Yeah, I think networks are really important, a really important part of,
that's how the posh boys got ahead.
Well, I don't know. I'm not one, so I don't know how it operates. But one of the things that I've really benefited from in my career is building a network internationally as well. And this is the point I'm making about countries like India. The ability to learn, the ability to communicate, that is going to be really important, because we can't just look inside our own country. I think we need to be open to ideas across the board.
In that sense, you're in a unique position, because you're a former Prime Minister. You have such an experience of the world stage and so many different portfolios. There's not a single portfolio that matters, I think, that you've not...
I've never been health secretary.
Okay.
But I'm not, that's not
what you wanted to
That's not volunteering for that, no.
But, so it gives you a unique advantage in building those networks. And nowadays, you don't really need a state to be a leader, do you? Or do you? Do you need a nation state behind you to be a global leader?
Well, we do have WhatsApp now, which is great for networking. And in my time in government, the amount of diplomacy that's now carried out on the phone, WhatsApp groups,
outside the regular,
because that's how you build relationships with people. That's how you get things done. And because things are changing so much, the old structures like the UN Security Council don't necessarily work for the issues we're facing at the moment. We did a lot of work with the G7 to get the sanctions on Russia. That's a more informal grouping. And of course, leaders are important. Leaders of countries are important in shaping the future. But I think new ideas are important as well. And one of the ideas I'm putting forward is the idea of the G7 plus our allies acting as an economic NATO to try and counter authoritarian regimes. And those are the types of ideas that I want to advocate, and I want to use my network and channels and platforms to be able to do that.
I'd love to take a sneak peek at your WhatsApp group. Or groups. You must be having several groups. I mean, there must be the working mom group, there must be the global leader group. I wonder, it must be quite fascinating.
There's various groups.
So really, when you look at Britain now, Great Britain now, you've had the honor of leading it for however short a time. What is the kind of country that you wanted to be in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, I think the Great Britain, now we've left the European Union, has the opportunity to be a leader in ideas. We've got the opportunity to be more flexible, more nimble, and the opportunity to form alliances in a way that is more difficult when you're part of a big bloc. And that's why we launched the India-UK trade deal talks. That's something we wouldn't have been able to do before.
That's something that you
That's something I did, and we're now moving forward on that. Joining the CPTPP, which is the Trans-Pacific. Well, it's the massive Trans-Pacific trade area, which has countries like Australia, Japan, Canada in it, Mexico in it. And some people say, well, Britain's not on the Pacific, but I say that's a state of mind. And what we want to be is we want to be working with our like-minded friends and allies. So I think Britain, as a great believer in freedom, in democracy and self-determination, we can form alliances with other countries around the world and help move things in that direction as part of a team. And what is exciting is about our close relationship with India and being able to move that forward as well. So I think that's the kind of role Britain can play. But of course, in order to do that, we need to be a competitive, forward-leaning country, leading in science, technology, media, all of those kind of things.
You've been an MP now for 4 terms already. You know, you've seen the media evolve. You've seen the rise of social media. Sometimes more
Sometimes
than a feral beast.
Sometimes we wish we'd put the genie back in the bottle, but you can't, can you?
It's too late now.
It's too late.
But what is it like to be a leader in the age of social media? It can be sometimes heartbreaking, but also a great way to reach out directly to the people that you want to listen to you, right?
It is. It can be a force for good. One thing that I think it has done is though shorten the amount of time you have to get ideas and issues across.
Right.
So the so-called Twitter storm, I think, isn't always good for politics, because some of the things that we're talking about, educating a society better or building long-term alliances, they're not things that can be done overnight. They're things that take time, and sometimes social media can be quite rapid in its judgments, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But I think when the printing press was invented, it was quite a disruptive force, and we're just seeing the effects of that force on the world. But ultimately, what I believe it should do is drive more engagement, more people being able to express their opinions, and that has to be a good thing in the long term. Although I think it has had an impact on politics, and it has created quite a sort of short-term time cycle.
Are there things that you see sometimes about yourself which make you go, this is really too much, or something that makes you laugh?
To be honest, I block a lot of it out. And I think you have to. I think you have to, because I see a lot of my colleagues in Parliament who read the stuff people write about them, which can be quite vitriolic. And I think it's, if you expose yourself to too much of that, I think it's quite damaging. So I get it filtered. I get a filtered version, which I think, if you're a public figure and you really expose yourself to the full kind of panoply of what people are saying, I think it would be quite difficult.
Yeah, I think it would be tremendously, shall we say, not very good for one's mental health.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So you've got to preserve your sanity in a very difficult world, right? You've got to keep your blinkers on, do what you think is what you want to do, right?
Exactly, and you've got to focus on what can I actually do in the position I'm in to affect the change that I want to see. And what things like social media have done is they create a lot of noise. People want to commentate on what's happening on a soap opera, or what's happening on the other side of the world,
or who's wearing what,
and these things are not, no one is going to care a week later, let alone 5 weeks later or 5 years later. And I think it's really important for politicians and opinion leaders to actually look at the long term, and that's what some of our adversaries are very good at, and we need to get in that habit too.
When you look at the world now, how do you see it? Do you see it on the cusp of a tremendous crisis, or do you see it on the cusp of tremendous good, tremendous hope? How do you look at the world?
The way I see it is, I think the next 5 years is going to be incredibly important for the world, and I think we have a choice. I think we have a choice that there could be a future which looks like the rise of authoritarian regimes. I've just seen a book called Authoritarian Century, which is sort of predicting that we will see a rise in state capitalism, a rise in the number of people living in regimes where they don't have freedom or choice or freedom of speech. I don't think that is inevitable at all, but I think in order to challenge that, free democracies need to work together and fight back and take control of things like our economic choices, who we trade with, who we invest with, where our supply chains are. And we need to make sure that we are defending ourselves and making sure that free democracies are able to defend themselves, like Ukraine is a very good example of that. So the future isn't written yet. It never is.
Yes.
And what we have to do is learn the lessons of history. And I think the lessons of history are that if we don't act early on emerging threats, we regret it later. So one issue I'm very concerned about is Taiwan.
Yeah.
And the fact that China is now explicitly saying that they want to take control of Taiwan. Yeah. I think we have to make sure Taiwan is able to defend itself, so we don't end up with a free democracy being extinguished and all the consequences there would be, such as freedom of navigation in the Pacific. You know, we've got to deal with these issues early.
So you see that as another possible flashpoint?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we also talk a little about the three forces of good: technology transformation, green growth, and women empowerment? These, I think, really are the things that, and green growth is really a response to climate change in a way. So do you see these three forces also making a big difference? I mean, if we're able to harness them to making a big difference.
We need to harness in the right way. I mean, technology, as we've been discussing, can be a negative force.
ChatGPT,
you know, in the hands, but in the hands of authoritarian regime, it's used to monitor people and control people.
Yeah.
And I really worry about that. I worry about, you know, countries getting the ability to use technology in a very coercive way, and that is a problem. So I think we need to be very open-eyed about what technology can deliver. Of course it can deliver immense good.
Yeah.
Of course it can help societies leapfrog huge stages of development that our countries have been through, but we also need to be aware of the risks. And you know, on the subject of transition and transition to renewables, you know, yes, we need to do it, but again, we shouldn't end up being dependent on solar panels produced in countries whose values we don't share.
Right.
So we just got to be very careful that the way we proceed is not value neutral. These things aren't value neutral. They are very closely related to the type of society we want to live in. And sometimes people think that they're unalloyed good. They're not unalloyed good if they are based in a society that is focused on coercion. That is not an unalloyed good. Women's empowerment is vitally important.
Yeah.
It's vitally important. And having said that both technology and renewables, we have to make sure we're doing it in the right way. I think giving everybody a voice in society is right, and allowing people to exercise their full potential and opportunity. It's not just morally wrong for women to be held back, it's actually economically stupid as well.
Right. So how do you see the next couple of years for yourself?
Well, what I'm interested in, this is why I'm here in India at this ideas event, is that I am interested in the ideas that are going to shape the future. And I'm interested in how can we turn the tide on the rise of authoritarianism and instead make sure that we are backing free democratic societies. And what do we need to do that? What do we need to change about the way we do trade, about the way we do economics, the way we talk about who we are? Because I think in many ways the free world's been on the back foot.
Yeah.
And we're often quite self-critical and quite apologetic about what we are, which we don't find that type of language coming out of Russia and China. So I'm interested.
Confident of who
well, exactly, and I think we should be confident about who we are, and that's the work I want to do, because I think the next 5 years are going to be absolutely critical.
Wonderful. Such a pleasure to talk
to you. Thank you very much.
Truss, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was Liz Truss, Right Honourable MP, former Prime Minister of Great Britain. Wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.